Hi, how's it going? This is Jefferson Keith Langley, Oswork, here with another episode of Inside Look, Client Confessions. I'm here today with Leanne Tormey. Leanne, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Jefferson. It's great to be with you.
Likewise. Appreciate you making the time to have this, impromptu, raw little chat about what's going down. So, yeah, I don't really have a format, so I just kind of flow and just let everything kind of unfold. But I thought it'd be interesting if you would tell everybody kind of your background in regards to your profession. I mean, I'm so impressed with like what you've done in your life, and especially in the scholastic space, and when it comes to kids, that's pretty dear to my heart, and we talked about it before we started recording. You have another friend doing some amazing stuff with kids, and I just think it's so brilliant, and you got to see it in such a profound way, as with what you did for such a long career. And so tell everybody a little bit about like where you went to school, and where you're from, and all that kind of stuff, and then kind of a little bit of your journey, so that it's very clear about what we're talking about in regards to your sessions and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, I've been an educator for the last 30 years. I think from the time I was very young, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I was blessed with fantastic models, and frankly, it's a funny story, but when I was young and my parents used to ask me what I did in school, I wasn't the kind of kid who said, we went to recess, or we did this or we did that. I used to describe how my teachers taught, and I would say things like, oh, it was so cool, Mrs. Jones lined us up this way today. And my parents would laugh and say, if you paid a little more attention to what your teachers were teaching instead of how your teachers were teaching, things might be going better for you academically. But in reality, I had started studying my craft when I was 7 or 8 years old. And so by the time I had my own classroom, I felt like I had the gift of working with all of these amazing educators. So I've dedicated this time to working with young people, always first focused on developing really good rapport with them, relationship building, and then helping them move from where they are to where they need to be academically. I taught math, I taught science, I taught developmental reading. And in about 7 years into my teaching, I committed the ultimate sin, which in teaching means you become an administrator. And for the rest of that time, I've worked as a building administrator. I've been a curriculum developer. I've been a superintendent of schools in Connecticut, and all of that I think has been just a reward of having a great education. I graduated from George Washington University with my undergrad. I have 2 master's degrees from Iona College in New Rochelle, and I finally earned my doctorate in 2014 from the University of Connecticut. And my studies have all been about leadership and what moves people into the leadership space. So that's just a little bit about, who I am and what my background has been.
Amazing. UConn. I love it.
Go Huskies.
I mean, go. Yeah, when I was growing up, they were amazing at basketball. I think they still are.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, great. Thank you for that. I mean, I don't do the same. I don't, in the other interviews, I don't do this the same way. But I wanted to set the stage with, the talk about the session work we did together and stuff. Is that, it's just so in your blood, and it's in your genes, and you live it, you breathe it. And for people that listen to you, I hope a big takeaway, at least for me, to point out is that you wear your heart on your sleeve about what you do, and you care fully. And that doesn't just mean about because it's kids. I think it's just you allow yourself to be in that space to express yourself at that level, which is amazing. I know when we first chatted to talk about sessions and working together, we talked about your background, which is why I wanted to start it off, because I look at it and go, she's so into it, and what it's going to parlay and where you're taking it, and we'll talk about that throughout the conversation, where you're taking that journey and your personal, also your personal journey on how you got here and what you've been through. But where that's going is amazing, and I want to make sure that by the end of it that people get a very clear picture about what you're doing. But so in your, I think from the get-go when we first talked, and you can please elaborate, I think we saw eye to eye just on sort of how things worked. You have that nice balance that I think is very profound, that I know I promote, which is a very balanced physical awareness and just being in the body. And there's things you have to do in order to make things happen, but also being in touch with the spiritual side or religious side or whatever people want to call it, and that combination of it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think when we first, from the moment we first chatted and said, hey, look, this is what I do, and you're going, here's where I want to go, or there's some confusion about maybe some components, because that's normal for all of us. We can't see everything and we can't know everything, and that's why we surround ourselves with people that are amazing so they can go, hey, what about this, what about that? And but I think we hit it off pretty well, and we saw eye to eye that, hey, look, where you want to go and what you're going to be doing is going to require that function of yourself that is part spiritual, part physical. You'd have to be
no
that
doubt.
Way, right?
That I honestly don't know how to be any other way.
When you chatted with me, was that to decide, like, okay, yes, I want to do work with them? Did that play a part of it? Because I know I'm very selective about who I work with. This is not I'm not pumping out clients. This is not a numbers game. I mean, I know there are other men and women out there. It's like, I just need to find the most basic way to hit as many people as possible. That's not my jam. But did you feel that played a part? Because I know that played a part, is that you got that component of those two worlds interacting together.
Yeah, I mean, in hoping for a relationship in which I could learn and grow and see myself moving from beyond where I am right now, I wanted to work with you because you were a guide, you were an intuit, a seer, a thought facilitator, and for me in our work, very much a mirror. And so, having those qualities just has been invaluable in terms of where we've been able to take the conversation in a really relatively short period of time.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Was the experience like what you thought it was going to be? Did you have any preconceived notions? Because I know a lot of people are, I talked about this in other ones, but a lot of people are trying to, figure it out. And what do you call this? And was it what you expected? What was that experience like?
I think going into it, I had already a willingness to give up on expectation in terms of, being willing to go with the flow. And I think that was probably the best thing that I could have done, because I didn't know how the process would play out. But I can tell you from the moment it started, it was not only comfortable, but it just felt right. One of the things that I would want to share is that, the sessions begin with this very powerful opportunity to state your name 3 times, to state my name 3 times. And I'm guessing that's, to give both of us a sense of connectedness, and also, to establish my space in the conversation and in the universe. And that in and of itself, we don't often state our own names that many times. And that in itself is just a powerful statement of being, right? That this time is going to be focused on me, not in a selfish way, but in the hopes of drawing from the inside of me in order to impact other people. And I think it was with that tone setting that I knew that I was in for a good ride, so to speak.
Interesting, yeah. That's good. A lot of people don't pick up on that, which is why I feel that the productivity from this, the work together has been so, nuclear, because you're so aware, and you're sharp in different ways, and absolutely 100% we don't take the time to say, I'm here, I'm right here. This is Jefferson. James Bond does it. I mean, come on. He walks up and says, James Bond. I'm Bond, James Bond. I mean, well,
listen, if it's good enough for James Bond, it's good enough for me.
That's right. So it is somewhat to establish. It's to kind of set the tone. Like, hey, this is about me. This is about what we're doing. This is, I get a feel for. I listen to how you say it. I look at how you say it. Was there confidence there? Is there willingness there? I mean, I can read all those things and make my, kind of calculations on where this is headed. It tells me where you're at. It tells me what you're about. And people may listen to this and say, how? Well, I mean, you're not me, so you don't know how to read that. But it just it's a very clear. It's an indicator, right? It's a very clear indicator on what someone's about. And
I think it's all in the. I think it's all in the tonality, right? It's in the level of confidence. I mean, the second time we did it, I became very aware that each time I said it came out slightly differently. And the only thing that I can say that I was pleased with was that none of the times that I said my name did I say it as though it were a question. Right?
Right. It was like a declaration.
It was definitely a declaration, and it felt very powerful, and it was also very grounding.
Correct. You're here, you're present, you're in your body. It's like, let's do this. Let's pull pull apart the puzzles and the layers and see what can be polished and upgraded and all that kind of stuff. So as we move through the sessions, is there anything that you'd be willing to share about, like, what your takeaways were? Was there anything that you were unimpressed by, or I mean, if there was, or was there anything that you were kind of like, oh, that's very interesting how he did that, or what? Because they don't, most people are not going to know what we're talking about. So I'm really doing this to try to make sure that other side is speaking, like, hey man, when I was in this session, this is how I saw what happened, and this is what it did to me, maybe, and everyone has their own experience, but please feel free to express, like, your experience in the session and what transpired.
Yeah. Well, as we got started, one of the things that was most powerful for me was your use of imagery and symbolism of imagery. And it just, I can't even tell you where it began or how it made its way into the conversation. I think I was just concentrating really hard on trying to, I don't know if this makes sense, but like try to put myself on the same thought plane as you. And you started to describe this visual, and I'm more than happy to share it. You were describing a stadium, and you were describing me being at center court, And you were literally drawing a picture for me with words, and because I love to retain this kind of stuff, I had paper and pencil in front of me. And as you described what you were seeing, I was drawing that picture of the tennis court and me at the center. And we talked about how on the sidelines there were 4 different bags. And, the bags included some really deep things. Like one of the bags was fear, and one was the unknown, and one was the past, and one was missed opportunity. And I remember saying to you, gosh, that just all sounds so negative. And, by the time we were done, I stopped looking at those bags as like literal baggage, right? And started to see those bags as like storage units where I could keep whatever I wanted from each of those areas. And, as we talked, it became clear that those items in those bags were to become my tools for the work that I wanted to do going forward. And there was no coincidence that I was in a stadium, because we had talked about, waiting for the people to gather. And I think for me that was so symbolic of, the work that I'm wanting to do going forward, and the messaging that I'm, wanting to put out to the world, and the fact that the experiences that I've had in my life have in no way been coincidental, that they are very much part of the overall plan for me. And how by being able to reflect on those experiences and pull out the lessons, take out the gems, the pearls of wisdom, whatever it is that the universe has wanted me to learn from them, that I can then somehow leverage and parlay those into whatever it is that my next mission is, professionally and personally. So I would say that I would just say that image in and of itself became a way of describing this notion that my past is not my present, and that it's also not my future, but that it absolutely creates the underpinnings for whatever it is that I become.
100%. That's amazing. And, the importance and poignancy of the fact that, we don't know each other at that level. We never talked about the fact that you like tennis, that, none of that stuff. And that, I tell everyone, look, this is not, I don't put you through A, B, C, D. This is very tailor-made. I've never used that analogy before. I won't use that analogy again because it literally related to you. And
and the really interesting connection for me was the fact that I've been thinking so much about my father, and I shared with you that my father was a music promoter, and how literally his job was about filling stadiums. And with like intense musical performances, right? And
right.
He used to say to me, you could fill a stadium. And so just your ability to tap into that, I'll tell you, my jaw sort of dropped a bit when we were having that conversation, because it was far less about tennis and far more about knowing that there was intervention from another dimension in the conversation, which I really appreciated, and it helped me honestly to say, yeah, I mean, this guy's the real deal.
Thank you. I mean, I found it so interesting on how it was unfolding and in the moment, and what was coming out, and kind of what we were pulling apart, and the different components that, as you so poignantly said, that have now become the underpinning of what you're becoming and what you're doing, and here all of us, we spend so much time and energy being dominated by so much of these pictures that, and I talk about those in the session, the pictures and, removing pictures, and we moved pictures out of your space and all that kind of stuff that, I just found the power of pictures, because we as human beings are made up of all these pictures and these memories and all this, that it just became this kind of easier way to communicate through imagery, and we pulled things apart, and you responded in very powerful ways in regards to those things, and going, hey, this brings up this. Is that what you're talking about? And me, I'm so adamant about the participation from the other side, from you or anyone else, that you make me better by being your best self, and you would throw back things and going, but I want to know why is this happening, and how is that clarity going to come out, so that I understand what I'm going to do with it as I take it out of these bags, or what I store in these bags. I want to make sure I'm in authority, I guess is the word, authority of these bags, rather than what it's been, which is these bags being authority of me, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, because when you started to talk about, showing up as your best self, I think one of the things that other people might find it interesting to know is that before our work, you laid out a series of to-dos and not to-dos in terms of how to show up, fully present. And, having everything to do with, getting a really good night's sleep, and making sure you're hydrated, and making sure that you're not, putting anything negative in your body, so that your brain is open and that your spirit is open, as an entryway to the experience. But then also, and you'll know, I appreciate this so much as an educator, is leaving the session with an assignment, right? So that it's bookended, and that the thought processing and the learning and whatever continues beyond the session, so that there's a measure of accountability, right, as the recipient of all of this guidance.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, well done. Because I love, look, and I've talked about this, and people, I don't want to go into it, but I love the spiritual side. I think it's beautiful, and being Zen is super cool. Bruce Lee was into it, right? But me, it's like you got to go do something with it. You got to go put it in act, put it into movement, and so which transitions into, so that we can tell everybody kind of like, where's it going from there. You took your assignment and ran with it, and it's, you've got blogs, and you had the blog beforehand, but now the blog is even intensifying. I saw you jumped on you were a guest interview, you did a guest interview on one of, with another colleague of yours, Michael. So much things are happening, and it was just kind of pointing the missile in the right direction, and forming the missile, adding an upgraded system to the, you're going, and it's so obvious that you're destined for what you're going to do, but I want you to elaborate, like, where it went from there and what you're doing, so people can go, so she came in, she did this, they moved some stuff, and now she's doing this.
Yeah, so for me, one of the real takeaways, and I think it's important for anybody listening to know that, like so many other people in the world, I've had some pretty significant trauma in my life. And using that trauma, to sort of step out of the dark and into the light. That was kind of the theme, or the message that I really took from our work together. And part of that stepping into the light, and knowing how to do it now has become a model for me to help other people, because it can be done. And so, having done the work and really at this point trying to solidify a model for that, I feel like I'm reinventing myself. I will always tell people that, I have a dream job, And one day I plan on being Secretary of Education of the United States. And it's because I believe so strongly in teaching and learning. I believe so strongly in the power of education as a leveler of the playing field in this country. But I think that my next period of work is really going to be centered on adults and talking about the importance of social emotional learning for adults, right? We're getting much better at that with young children, but we have generations of people who have learned very much through the school of hard knocks. And it is possible to learn things like empathy and decision making and, and all of those things. And so I'm trying to use several different vehicles to do this work. I mean, certainly thank you for allowing me to talk briefly about my blog. I hope that your listeners are familiar with a site called Medium. If they're not, Medium, you can just Google it. It is a platform for writers. It is a service through which, it's an incredible service through which, if you are an avid reader, you have the ability to go on to Medium and select from a variety of topics that you might be interested in, and Medium then delivers you a curated magazine to your email every day. And so I have a blog on Medium. People can find it through Leanne Tormey, Be Brave. It has started out as an opportunity for me just to share some of the experiences that I've had in my life and to encourage other people to know that you can not only press through those experiences, but you can use them then as a springboard for your next accomplishments. I also have the really great pleasure of working with a colleague and a dear friend of mine named Michael Arterberry, who has a program called The Power of Peace. And he and I have been looking for ways for many years to work together. And I think it's because of my work with you that I've found sort of the thread to make that happen. And he and I are doing some webcasting in a series called The Human Condition, which I'm really excited about. I have an organization called the LeanneTAdvantage that will help me now to bring my services and support to school faculties. I mean, there's no doubt that right now teachers are going through, the greatest challenge of their professional lives, trying to make learning and school safe for children, and also trying to keep parents comfortable. Every day, I will tell you that before pandemic, every day that an educator walks into a classroom, they are taking brave and courageous steps. And I can say that, one of the small benefits of this pandemic has been that educators are finally getting their due in terms of, what they bring to the world. And I'm so happy for my colleagues who are finally being celebrated and appreciated. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. They are other critical, essential workers. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is that while all of these things were very much ideas and concepts, I feel as though my work with you has really given me the direction and the steam to push go on all of these projects simultaneously, so that people can begin to experience them almost as a fabric, right? That there are a lot of different ways that the messaging will be coming out. And, I laugh, but maybe one day that stadium will be filled, right? And maybe not to say one day, but, it will be, is the way for me to look at it. It's coming. Exactly.
Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, we talked about it, and, obviously there's not time to get into it because we're making these little sprints, but, when you talk about from the dark into the light, and, this, everyone might go, oh, that's very spiritual, kitschy, but you know what we talked about in the session. It's, you're talking about giving someone the fundamental backbone in order for them to leave a domestic violence situation and turn their life into something important. It's, yes, it's imagery of dark into the light, and that is sort of your blueprint based on your educational background. I mean, you're literally putting together a curriculum of how to take someone from the space of darkness, aka their situation, and these are severe traumas. These are traumas that are debilitating. They cripple people for life. We talked about, my experience with that with, my sibling and all that kind of stuff. And when you're talking about someone like yourself with the immense background you have, education is not just like, hello, Jimmy, and hello, Sally, 2 + 2 = 4. We're talking about tools and critical thinking natures that you're giving these, your clients and, as you said, faculty, and where your brand is going. It's going to change the complete terrain of how people approach moving someone from a situation into, the open pastures, if you will, right?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to literally take off whatever mask you have been wearing, right?
Right.
And set it aside and realize that you too are enough and that there is no need to hide. And there's no benefit from hiding, frankly. And that by being courageous and sharing your true self and your true experiences, you help other people, and in return they help you. So that's that's the direction that I see my work going, and so much of that has come together since our sessions together. So I'm really grateful.